Hello to all my story lovers. Now I'm going to read the remaining part of the story of Fantastic Mr. Fox. That is the chapter 12, Badger. Mr. Fox and the three remaining small foxes dug fast and straight. They were all too excited now to feel tired or hungry. They knew they were going to have a hacking great feast before long, and the fact that it was none other than bogus chicken they were going to eat made them struggle with laughter every time they thought of it. It was lovely to realize that while the fat farmer was sitting up there on the hill waiting for them to starve, he was also giving them their dinner without knowing it. Keep digging, said Mr. Fox. It's not much further. All of a sudden, a deep voice above their heads said, "Who goes there?" The foxes jumped. They looked up quickly and they saw peeking through a small hole in the roof of tunnel a long, black, pointed, furry face. "Badger!" cried Mr. Fox. "Foxy!" cried Badger. "My goodness me! I'm glad I have found someone at last. I have been digging around in circles for 3 days and nights. I haven't the foggiest idea where I am." Badger made the hole in the ceiling bigger and dropped down beside the foxes. A small badger, his son, dropped down after him. "Haven't you heard what's happening up on the hill?" Badger said excitedly. "It's Jaws. Half the wood has disappeared and there are men with guns all over the countryside. None of us can get out, even at night. We are all starving to death." "Who is we?" asked Mr. Fox. "All us diggers. That's me and Mole and Rabbit and all our wives and children. Even Weasel, who can usually sneak out of the tightest spot, is right now hiding down my hole with Mrs. Weasel and 6 kids. What on earth are we going to do, Foxy? I think we are finished." Mr. Fox looked at his 3 children and he smiled. The children smiled back at him, sharing his secret. "My dear old Badger," he said, "this mess you are in is all my fault." "I know it's your fault," said Badger furiously, "and the farmers are not going to give up till they have got you. Unfortunately, that means us as well. It means everyone on the hill." Badger sat down and put a paw around his small son. We are done for," he said softly. "My poor wife up there is so weak she can't dig another yard." "Nor can mine," said Mr. Fox, "and yet at this very minute she is preparing for me and my children the most delicious feast of plump, juicy chickens." "Stop!" cried Badger. "Don't tease me. I can't stand it." "It's true!" cried small foxes. "That's not teasing. We have got chicken galore." "And because everything is entirely my fault," said Mr. Fox, "I invite you to share the feast. I invite everyone to share it. You and Mole and Rabbit and Weasel and all your wives and children. There will be plenty to go around, I can assure you. You mean it? Cried Badger. You really mean it. Mr. Fox pushed his face close to Badger's and whispered darkly, Do you know where we have just been? Where? Right inside Bogey's chicken house number 1. No. Yes. But that is nothing to where we are going now. You have come just at the right moment, my dear Badger. You can help us dig, and in the meanwhile, your small son can run back to Mrs. Badger and all the others and spread the good news. Mr. Fox turned to Small Badger and said, Tell them they are invited to Fox's feast. Then bring them all down here and follow this tunnel back until you find my home. Yes, Mr. Fox, said the Small Badger. Yes, sir. Right away, sir. Oh, thank you, sir. And he screamed quickly back through the hole in the roof of the tunnel and disappeared. Now 13th chapter, Bun's Giant Storehouse. My dear Foxy, cried Badger, what in the world has happened to your tail? Don't talk about it, please, said Mr. Fox. It's a painful subject. They were digging the new tunnel. They dug on in silence. Badger was a great digger and the tunnel went forward at a terrific pace. Now that he was lending a paw. Soon they were crouching underneath yet another wooden floor. Mr. Fox grinned slyly, showing sharp white teeth. If I am not mistaken, my dear Badger, he said, we are now underneath the farm which belongs to that nasty little pot-bellied dwarf, Buns. We are in fact directly underneath the most interesting part of that farm. Ducks and geese, cried the small foxes, licking their lips, juicy tender ducks and big fat geese. Exactly, said Mr. Fox. But how in the world can you know where we are? Asked Badger. Mr. Fox grinned again, showing even more white teeth. Look, he said, I know my way around these farms blindfold. For me, it's just as easy below ground as it is above it. He reached high and pushed up one wooden floorboard, then another. He poked his head through the gap. Yes, he shouted, jumping up into the room above. I have done it again. I have hit it smack on the nose, right in the bull's eye. Come and look. Quickly, Badger and the 3 small foxes scrambled up after him. They stopped and stared. They stood and gaped. They were so overwhelmed they couldn't speak, for what they now saw was a kind of fox's dream, a badger's dream, a paradise for hungry animals. This, my dear old Badger, proclaimed Mr. Fox, is Bun's mighty storehouse. All his finest stuff is stored in here before he sends it off to market. Against all the 4 walls of great room, stacked in cupboards and piled upon shelves reaching from floor to ceiling were thousands and thousands of the finest and the fattest ducks and geese, plucked and ready for roasting. And up above, dangling from the rafters, there must have been at least 100 smoked hams and 50 sides of bacon. Just feast your eyes on that, cried Mr. Fox, dancing up and down. What would you think of it? Pretty good grub. Suddenly, as though springs had been released in their legs, the three hungry small foxes and the ravenously hungry badger sprang forward to grab the luscious food. Stop, ordered Mr. Fox. This is my party, so I shall do the choosing. The others fell back, licking their chops. Mr. Fox began prowling around the storehouse, examining the glorious display with an expert eye. A thread of saliva slid down one side of his jaw and hung suspended in mid-air, then snapped. We must overdo it, he said. Must not give the game away. Must not let them know what we have been up to. We must be neat and tidy and take just a few of the choicest morsels. So to start with, we shall have 4 plump young ducks. He took them from the shelf. Oh, how lovely and fat they are. No wonder Buns gets a special price for them in the market. All right. Badger, lend me a hand to get them down. You children can help as well. There we go. Goodness me. Look how your mouths are watering. And now I think we had better have few geese. 3 will be quite enough. We will take the biggest. Oh my, you will never see finer geese than these in the king's kitchen. Gently does it. That's the way. And what about a couple of nice smoked hams? I adore smoked hams, don't you, Badger? Fetch me that step ladder, will you please? Mr. Fox climbed up the ladder and handed down 3 magnificent hams. And do you like bacon, Badger? I am mad about bacon, cried Badger, dancing with excitement. Let's have a side of bacon, that big one up there. And carrots, Dad? Said the smallest of the 3 small foxes. We must take some of those carrots. Don't be a trip, said Mr. Fox. You know, we never eat things like that. It's not for us, Dad. It's for the rabbits. They only eat vegetables. My goodness me, you are right, cried Mr. Fox. What a thoughtful little fellow you are. Take 10 bunches of carrots. Soon, all this lovely loot was lying in the neat heap upon the floor. The small foxes closed their noses, twitching, their eyes shining like stars. And now, said Mr. Fox, we shall have to borrow from our friend Buns 2 of those useful push carts over in the corner. He and Badger fetched the push carts, and the ducks and the geese and the hams and the bacon were loaded onto them. Quickly the push carts were lowered through the hole in the floor. The animals slid down after them. Back in the tunnel, Mr. Fox again pulled the floorboards very carefully into place so that no one could see they had been moved. My darlings, he said, pointing to two of the three small foxes, take a cart each and run back as fast as you can to your mother. Give her my love and tell her we are having guests for dinner. The badgers, the moles, the rabbits, and the weasels. Tell her it must be truly great feast, and tell her the rest of us will be home as soon as we have done one more little job. Yes, Dad, right away, Dad, they answered, and they grabbed the trolley each and went rushing off down the tunnel. Badger has doubts. The 14th chapter. Just one more visit, cried Mr. Fox, and I will bet I know where that will be, said the only small fox now left. He was the smallest fox of them all. Where? Asked Badger. Well, said the smallest fox, we have been to Bogies and we have been to Buns, but we haven't been to Bean. It must be Bean. You're right, said Mr. Fox, but what you don't know is which part of Bean's place we are about to visit. Which? They said both together. Aha, said Mr. Fox. Just you wait and see. They were digging as they talked. The tunnel was going forward fast. Suddenly Badger said, doesn't this worry you just a tiny bit, Foxy? Worry me, said Mr. Fox. What? All this stealing. Mr. Fox stopped digging and stared at Badger as though he had gone completely dotty. My dear old furry friend, he said, do you know anyone in the whole world who wouldn't swipe a few chickens if his children were starving to death? There was a short silence while Badger thought deeply about this. You are far too respectable, said Mr. Fox. There's nothing wrong with being respectable, Badger said. Look, said Mr. Fox, Bogies and Buns and Bean are out to kill us. You realize that, I hope. I do, Foxy, I do indeed, said gentle Badger. But we are not going to stoop to their level. We don't want to kill them. I should hope not, indeed, said Badger. We wouldn't dream of it, said Mr. Fox. We shall simply take a little food here and there to keep us and our families alive, right? I suppose we will have to, said Badger. If they want to be horrible, let them, said Mr. Fox. We down here are decent, peace-loving people. Badger laid his head on one side and smiled at Mr. Fox. Foxy, he said, I love you. Thank you, said Mr. Fox. And now let's get on with the digging. 5 minutes later, Badger's front paws hit against something flat and hard. What on earth is this? He said. It looks like a solid stone wall. He and Mr. Fox scraped away the soil. It was a wall, but it was built on bricks, no stones. The wall was right in front of them, blocking their way. Now who in the world would build a wall under the ground? Asked Badger. Very simple, said Mr. Fox. It's the wall of an underground room. And if I am not mistaken, it is exactly what I am looking for. Now, this is the end of the chapter 14. So, like this story, subscribe my channel. Bye bye. I'm